Hi. Well, we are here, Awaken Your Work Life. Real stories. The real story today is, it took a little bit to get live today.
Yes,
What's going on, everybody? I am Julie Murphy, and Karin and I, as you know, every Wednesday, we go live, and it's been super helpful last few weeks bringing real people that are living real lives to bring real talk of how they've actually jumped off the ledge in their life and followed their heart and their soul. And financially, it always works out. You know, It's amazing to me how the money always shows up when you choose your heart and your soul. And so Katrina has been our referral, I'll say, right? So Danny, who was on last week, said, I think I have somebody else you guys need to talk to. And so Katrina, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I always love to just, it's important to just start your story. I mean, Karin's talked about how she jumped off the ledge 20 years ago, wrote a book, I Quit, and now she coaches people to do the same, get in alignment with that soul code of yours. And so tell us, Katrina, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, what a wild, twisty journey path it's been. But yeah, it's quite an adventure. So actually, so for me, I grew up in like small town West Virginia. Being I'm biracial. My dad's Black, my mom is white. So I definitely had a different perspective growing up, and sort of always wondered what the world was out there, and had these dreams of exploring and finding and sort of like maybe belonging someday, right? Just this really just sort of like interesting wanderlust, I think, that had started within me at a young age. But I grew up and my parents didn't have a lot of money, and so I was the kid that followed all the rules and wanted to be successful and make my parents proud. So I did all the things. I went to Smith College, got a math degree.
Woo-hoo! Wellesley.
Oh, really? Yeah, so the things, right? And like I moved to Atlanta and worked as an actuary for 8 years, which was not a bad experience, but it wasn't my dream. And when I got there, I realized pretty early on that it wasn't like the best fit, but it's kind of a golden handcuffs type of situation where you get paid super well and it's just really hard to leave. So I thought I would be smart, and I thought I would cheat the system and take a safe exit. So I would go get my MBA, right?
Yeah, totally.
Smart. Like that's quitting, but that's like smart people quitting. Like
how true is that statement, right?
Yeah. So I was like, yeah,
we think we have it all figured out.
Right? I was like, I know how I'll do this. And so I got like a full tuition fellowship, went to UNC, had an amazing experience. But after that, I went into market research and I moved out to Minnesota and worked at General Mills. And man, it was like, I thought I had changed my whole life, right? I have a second career and I have an MBA, and like, I finally traveled abroad for the first time when I was getting my MBA. It's like, my world is so different, except that I got back to corporate and it was the same thing, but worse, right? It was just this knowing, this heavy burden kind of on my soul that like, I'm not living my purpose. And I'm also spending basically whole days of my life doing things that don't matter to me and wishing that I was someone else, wishing that I had done something else with my life. And I remember being, around 30, 31, and just having this really overwhelming sense that comes with like a new decade of, I will blink and I will be 60 or 65 and nothing will have changed if I don't do something drastic right now. But the problem was, I didn't know what that thing was. I was lost. I was like, I got my MBA, I quit my career, I started over, and I still feel this feeling like, how do I change? So I ended up having someone recommend a life coach, went to the life coach, was like, tell me my purpose, like this, and everything will be amazing and I'll be so happy, right? And so that's what I thought I was signing up for. But somewhere after months of like excavation, I had this epiphany sitting on her couch. This voice inside of me was like, you don't want another job. You want to take a break. And it was like chills.
And wow, that's actually an option, right? Like, we don't think it's an option. It's not even an appetizer on the menu.
It's not even on the menu. It's not even like a thing you could skim. No. And actually, as cheesy as it sounds, I have to give credit to Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Eat, Pray, Love, because literally before, I was reading that in the middle of business school. Before that book, it truly never was something that I even considered. It was like a non-starter. Only people in movies or people in fictional novels or people that have trust funds would ever do something like that. Like, that's just not a thing normal people do. Like, it was not. And when she did it, I was like, my mind was blown. Like, what? People do this? I could do this. And then it was like, no, I couldn't do this. I'm in business school. I've got to go get like my MBA and I've got to do the job and like all the things. I can't do this, right? But that seed was planted. And so sitting on that couch, it was like that seed had grown big enough to just kind of sprout. And I was like, crap, this is really what I want. And so in that moment, right, I was sort of in a place of support having a coach. And I was just like, this is my truth. And she was like, well, what are we going to do about it? And so I went about setting out to save as much money as I could. I had $1,500 in my bank account. I still owed probably like $50,000 in MBA loans. Like, there was no reason I should be thinking I could take a break, but I was determined, right?
Wait, can you say that again for people?
Yeah, there was no reason, like no logical reason that I thought that I should have been able to take a break. It was
And
like,
this is where the magic is.
yes, because the math did not work out. I also owned a townhouse in Atlanta that I was losing money on every month. And if my like HVAC broke or my tenant left, like that was going to be a crisis, right? So with $1,500 in my account in this dream, it's like, I should just give up. But it was so true for me. And it's like, there's literally nothing else if not this. Like, I can't do this for 30 more years and feel like I lived my life. It will literally have been a waste. So like, I have no choice. So I started saving. I changed my relationship to money. I started tracking what I was spending and then trying to like have new habits and behaviors and save all the things I could save. And 18 months later, I had $40,000 in my bank account and I decided to leave and travel the world. And so I gave 8 months notice to my job as I was getting closer and closer to that financial goal. And I quit and I traveled around the world until I ran out of money. And that lasted me 20 months, so almost 2 years. And I just had like the time of my life. But I think it's also important to mention that when you're following kind of your path, right? When you're being true to yourself and doing the things that you need to do, life will still be hard, but it is so much more worth it. And I think you have so much less, you don't have regret. So the really sad story is that I'd been planning this break, as you know, for 18 months, gave notice 8 months in advance. About 1 week before my break started, my younger brother, unexpectedly passed away. And it was like the most catastrophic, awful, like worst thing that could have ever happened. And I think the one gift in all of the crap pile of things was that I didn't need that to be the catalyst to me reclaiming my life. Like, I have been working so hard for 18 months, right? To like reclaim it all.
But I want to tell you, Katrina, like, let's say you didn't get to that point.
Yeah.
Your brother's path would have been the bigger crisis that would have jolted you there if you hadn't have taken the pre-steps beforehand. Because I had a similar experience where I almost died on the operating table giving birth to my last child. And the only reason why it wasn't super catastrophic to me, as much as that sounds catastrophic, it was because of all the work and transition I had already done. So kudos to you for listening to your soul, like we said, the ears to hear your soul, earlier on than that, because that would have really have put you off the edge.
Yes, off the edge. And what it would have looked like would have been so different, right? Like, I would have stumbled into an abyss and felt like I didn't really know what to do. But I had been working towards this goal. And you know what? The way the universe conspired with the timing, it was like I had nothing but time to heal and process, right? Because I had saved the money, because I had been planning. My break was going to look a lot different emotionally than I thought. But like, I had $40,000 and nothing but time to really like do whatever it was my soul needed to do and whatever it was I wanted to do. And so it was a mixed bag, right? Like, there was a lot of grief, but there was also so much joy and gratitude. And to be able to know that like, I am a person who shows up for my life. Like, I don't need someone to tell me like, I don't need the worst of the worst of the worst. Like, I want to live. And so I'm here doing and failing and trying all the different ways, right, to live. And so in that experience, I just went on that break until, like I said, I ran out of money. And then I had to really process what my next right step was going to be. And as much as I wanted to think about getting certified to be a life coach or do those types of things, I still had like $45,000 of debt. And it was like, I really want to take that rain cloud and like get it off my head so that I can be free for the rest of my life. I want to get out of debt as fast as I can. So I decided to go back to corporate, but find a job that more aligned with my personal interest. And so I found this magical job I had dreamed about, but never thought I could have gotten 4 years before in the natural and organic food industry. And so I got to work on stuff I was passionate about, that I was actually a consumer of, and it was really great. And so 2 years, like 21 months into returning to corporate, I paid off all my debt. And that includes like a $15,000, $20,000 pay cut I took to switch to like a startup halfway through. So, I mean, I was like a master of money, right? Like you talk about the money will come. It was like I was making all these crazy choices that made no sense on paper. And it's like my needs were being met, my debt was being paid off, right? And this was after the $40,000 to take the break. So, and I'd spent all of that. So basically, once I became debt free, I got certified, started coaching, and then I quit my job, my corporate job in 2018. And I set out to build a full-time business, except that something wasn't feeling super aligned. And so I kind of downshifted and ended up on career break number 2 unintentionally, which was a very weird experience to like be on an unintentional career break. But now it was so weird, right? My first one was hyper planned. I had an itinerary. I knew all the things. It was like the exact opposite. But what I can say is that it was exactly what I needed. Like, talk about the ears to hear, right? It was like I had to stop pushing this thing that I thought I was supposed to want and supposed to create. And I had to just allow what was true for me. And I can tell you, like, with zero doubt, that that journey did 2 amazing things. One, it made me so super clear that I am here to be a career break coach and a sabbatical coach and help other people take that journey, having not one, but 2 and 2 completely different experiences. But also, there was a lot of unprocessed grief from my brother's passing that had sort of like built up that I didn't even know, right? I went through the grief. I was sad. It was 5 years later, but it was there for me. And so there was something I had to move through on top of just having more adventures and living my life, right? And I traveled literally up until the pandemic. So it was like some part of my soul wanted to go continue traveling the world and just knew, girl, do this now because things are about to change. And so for 2 years, I did it. And at the point where I was ready to be still, the pandemic happened. And I was like, wow, I guess this is my invitation to get still.
Well, and I think it's so important to point out that it doesn't have to be a linear line.
Mm-hmm.
Like so often that we feel like it has to be a linear line. And you did not take a linear line. Some of it was intentional, some of it was not intentional. But what I want to point out is that you were in the flow. You were in the flow of what came up and how you adjusted. And so many of us, like you talk about your debt, most of us don't get in the flow of our life because we're stuck with all of our past financial choices. And that's the debt that we carry. And that's the lack of space in our income that comes in from our paychecks to what goes out of our pockets on the other end. And so a big piece of this, I want to point out, part of Katrina's story is the fact that, she made intentional steps to create space in her life so that she had some of these choices in her work life. And, I had a conversation with a client yesterday that was really quite amazing to me about, they've built enough. Actually, there's 2 clients yesterday. It's really weird. Like people are getting to these pinnacle points. And I keep saying that we're either going to move more into our fear and keep our suffering patterns and call in the crisis, or we're going to make this turn into our mastery and what our soul's here to do. And that will be amplified. And we're just at this critical turning point for whatever reason, I think across the board, because I'm seeing this with so many people. And, to the point that you had brought up, Katrina, that, is it an option? Is it on the menu? Right. And I said to these people, I said to this one client, I go, your assets can spit you out $7,000 a month. And they're like, and she's 46. And she was like, huh? And I go, you hate your job. Okay, let's work on your budget. Let's adjust how you're living to fit in that number, which to a lot of people, 7,000 a month is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I said, I go, and you have to take taxes off of that. So, okay, so you're living on 5, but quit your job. Take the next couple of years and explore. But if we don't take the time like you did to create the space, whether it's the travel or the whatever, sometimes you just need that time. And there's always a way, but it's coming from a place of empowered choices, not just life by default. You know what I mean?
Well, the other thing that I think is really powerful, and I almost can't emphasize it enough, is that you said I had to stand in my truth.
Mm,
And one of the things that so many of us don't allow ourselves to do is to really explore what that is. Like what, and you don't have to do a thing with it. I don't really want to go. That is your truth. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You don't want to go to an event or whatever it is, but to acknowledge it and then make an informed choice. I'm going to go anyway because these people are really important to me. I'm going to go
right,
anyway for whatever reason, or I'm not going to go.
right,
And I
right.
just have to let people know that I'm not going to go, but not to be victimized by it. And so that is, to me, one of the most important, that's the most important first step. What's true for you? What is your truth? And then you can figure out what your plan needs to be or default into a plan, but at least you've looked at it. Like you got to look at it first. And then you said
Look, it's
you
that
were a
whole
person.
thing. Stop, look, and listen. Right? You have to look, and then you gotta listen when you start to hear the signs. Right?
Yeah,
So true.
it's a magnificent story. I'm so glad that you shared that because I know there are people listening going like, wait, what?
She did what?
Wait, how did how did she do that? And here's the thing. You didn't come from a trust fund. You did the
Right?
work. See, that's the other thing too. Like we have to be willing to put in a little elbow grease. And that elbow grease was, all right, how do I need to change the way I'm spending money? And Julie talks about this all the time. It's like, how are you using your money? Because saving is directly a function of how you're using it. And like you said, you created all kinds of like ways to really spend less. And
Yeah.
that resulted in saving more.
And it's
Super powerful.
And spending less doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not living the way that I want to live.
oh
Yeah,
my God.
that you've lost the quality of life.
Like
Right.
there's no, I am 100% not on board with deprivation. I think it's about prioritization. And like, I bought my mom a Dyson vacuum cleaner, right, for her Christmas present like 2 years ago because she has a bad hip. And it was like carrying the canister around. She needed a stick vacuum. I spend $350 to get my hair cut because I have crazy curly hair and I do it once a year and I just like my person, right? So it's not like I'm
Right.
living this deprived life, but it's like there's so many ways we are energetically releasing this money without any awareness that doesn't align
Right.
with our real true priorities. And so it's like when you harness that awareness, right? And you really bring it back to how do I live my best life like for me, not like what I think other
Right.
people or this default that I'm running on this
Yep.
programming. It's like it's amazing what happens with money.
Yeah.
Well, and,
Yeah.
and I'm always pointing out to people that, your spend is, whatever it is per month because you're unhappy in your job. And I guarantee you, when you create happiness, you won't have the urge to spend anymore. You won't want the material stuff because that's not
Mhm.
your driver anymore. Because the material stuff is just you trying to fill a void of some discontent you have going on in the inside.
Mhm.
And that's actually a really big component that people don't really think about. And and this is amplified. Like my brother said, when the kids transitioned to my house on Wednesdays, he goes, "How was Target today?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Ever since your divorce, Jewel, transition day, mom goes to Target with her kids." And I was like, "I do." And he goes, "What are you trying to make up for?" And I go, "Huh?" I go, "Oh shit, they are. They're buying toys every Wednesday." And I even justified it to myself of, okay, but if we get this, one has to donate to charity to somebody else so that we're not adding into the house. Like I thought I was being extremely conscious through the process. And my brother's going, "What's the real deal, Jewel?" He goes, "You teach this stuff." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you are so right." So it shows up not only in our work life, but it shows up in other areas going, yeah, my kids were like, this was a habit for almost 2 years of like almost every time they transitioned to my house, it was like, oh yeah, I gotta pick up stuff from Target. Yeah, but I didn't realize like what that really was doing. And God
Yeah.
bless, my brother's fiance. She was the one that pointed out to him he was doing actually the same darn thing, which was even funnier. And we both worked together.
Wow.
So we do this money dance with, you're right, Katrina, without awareness. And when you put intention into it, it's amazing when you make completely different choices.
Yeah.
Completely different choices, because you figured out, and Karen, you always say this, you figure out your why. You
That's
know, you figure out your why behind the intention. Like, what's your motivation? What's your, like, where's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I'll ask people that all the time. And they're going, I don't know. Like, the answer is always, I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's time to know. It's time to have your compelling reason. And it doesn't matter, Katrina, I've watched, even, it's funny, when you first started talking, I have 6 nieces and nephews that are biracial. And it's amazing and how the gift of being biracial gives you a sense of freedom just because the way you're born. Because you don't have to go by anybody's rules, because you're both. It's really amazing to me to see this profound sense of freedom, because there's less, because your parents have already broke the mold to like create whatever adventure they wanted because they loved each other, and I've watched this even unpack with my nieces and nephews. It's beautiful. And when you start to take that adventure, it's actually catchy to everybody else around you. Like, did you notice, like, were you the first one that jumped off the ledge and then you watched other people in your world then jump off the ledge as well?
I've definitely seen some people for sure do it, but not, it's sort of like a trickle effect. Like there's several years delay, right? Like it's almost like they have to get to their own pressure
Yeah,
point
you're a
or
mirror.
boiling point,
Right.
but when they do, what I did is inspiration and proof that like they won't die, right? That like it won't
Right.
drastically, end everything for them. But I think like you have to be, to both of your points, you have to be clear on your truth, which is your why of like what you're doing. And I think when you have your truth, right, and you start to really get in touch with your why, when you get to that boiling point, it's like, what wouldn't you sacrifice to not be in pain and to just like be able to do whatever it is that you're here to do? Like I see so many of my clients that are type A high performers, high achievers in their jobs. They make miracles happen every day with like less resources, less time, more responsibilities at home. And it's like they can achieve so much for someone else, but you give them, right, the like choice to do it for themselves. And it's like, I couldn't do that. I don't know what I'd do with that. I'm scared. No one's paying my bills. Like, I don't, like, I would have to be responsible for figuring that out. Like, I can't do that. Right. But it's like, are they really in touch with their purpose? Are they really in touch with the why of what they're doing? Or are they just running on some default programming that maybe was actually exciting to them at age 26, but no longer serves them?
Oh, I say that all the time, that it may have served you at one period of your life, but we get complacent and we get comfortable. And when we get to that point, what I've learned in the work I do is that that's when disease develops in people's bodies. When we're complacent and we don't follow the next adventure and we don't follow what our soul is screaming for us to do, literally that emotional processing crystallizes in our physical body and builds up, that leads to disease. And I can tell people over and over again going, okay, this is going to show up at breast cancer because you're nurturing everybody else except yourself. And every woman that you have ever met, they are super mother to other people. If they've had breast cancer, they mother everybody else and they do not mother themselves. They do not put themselves as a priority to anybody else. And every single one of them gets breast cancer. Everyone.
I have a client that actually this describes so well, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer halfway through our time together. And like, wow, I've never connected those dots or thought of it in that
I
way.
had a woman who, in the middle of her divorce process, it was a really big deal that she finally decided and I was like, I knew I could really help her. And all these attorneys are like, you need to take the time for your cancer and blah, blah, blah. You need to, heal. And the next husband was loving that because he was getting away with murder, having, all these extracurricular activities, we'll say. And and I said to her, I go, the best chemotherapy. And I'm like, this client's either going to fire me or I'm going to be the best thing since sliced bread. I said, you need to not listen to any of the doctors or anything, to stop. And what you need to do is you need to plow through this divorce and stand up for yourself with this man for what's true for you. And that's going to be the best chemotherapy for you. The doctors, and I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden she sends an email to everybody, copying the attorneys, the ex-husband, the financial planners, everybody. And she says, you know what? No, we are staying on our timetable. This divorce is going to be done by August, blah, blah. And it was like June, but they were all trying to kick the can. I'm like, she's right at the pinnacle of changing her life in a massively big way and standing up for her. Because this wasn't the first affair he had. There were plenty when the kids were younger. He was sleeping with the nannies and all that other stuff, right? Like, it was terrible. And sure as shit, they have no idea on how she healed from her cancer so fast. And it's just like, they're like, you're hitting off the charts levels. And I see this, men, it shows up as prostate and colon cancer. And for women, it's breast cancer. And because men will do for themselves what they won't do for others. Like, they'll be that provider, they'll hunker down, and they'll completely do it at the cost of their soul. Like, they will ignore their own soul to provide for those people that they love and care about. And so it all goes back to self-nurturing. And Deepak Chopra says that a cancer cell develops if that cell has lost its sense of purpose. And the easiest place, I think, for many of us to actually shift is in our work life, because the job is something that's outside of ourselves. It's not necessarily inside, but we don't realize that's the inside job that needs to help the shift.
Well, we also don't realize we're not socialized or trained to develop a strong sense of our own personal value and worth based on these same attributes, what we do well, what we love, what we aspire to. We're not trained to do that. We're still training people to get A's in every subject, which is ridiculous. Like, that's ridiculous. We're not all made that way. And what happens is subsequently we feel badly about those spaces where we aren't doing well. Right. And then that becomes part of our identity. And there, you said something earlier, Katrina, about, taking a stand for yourself. And one of the things that came up or comes up, and you said comes up with your clients too, is they're being these superstars for their bosses and for their organization. And they're showing up and then they turn around and look at themselves and like, I can't do that for me. And I think that is one of the most profound paradoxes to put in front of clients, because they can't process that intellectually. Why is it that you can be a superstar here? Do you think those talents, those gifts, your ability to make magic happen would disappear when applied in your own business? And their intellectual answer is no, right. But their heart answer, like they're trying to get there. They're like, well, when I logically know that doesn't make sense, but they haven't embodied it. Mm-hmm. They haven't owned it. And so there's all this work really that needs to be done about just personal value. And then when we hang our hat on what other people think, right? It's everything to be approved of by the boss, get the promotion, be the like, yeah, you saved the team. If that gets swept away, then we're standing there like, oh, now who am I? So I love that challenge, if you will, for everybody that comes across my path. If you think you can do it for them, that means you have the capacity to do it for you. And it takes a while to reconcile that. They want to resist. They want to resist. They're like, I don't know if that's true. What? What? Come on, you're the logic person, so it's very powerful and really profound and discovering and owning ourselves and our truth, right? Yeah, you can't have it both ways.
So true. So true. So if you were to give anybody a piece of advice, Katrina, what would it be as they're considering shifting their work life?
Okay, so I have so many pieces, but I'm going to give you one.
Okay, you got a couple nuggets. Give us your diamond, sister.
Yeah. I think as we move through life, we are wired to protect ourselves, right? To keep ourselves safe. And so we're always, when we want to make a change, when we want to make a shift, we're thinking about what would following my truth or doing this shift, what would it cost me? What will I lose now that I have, right? But we never ask ourselves, what am I risking by not doing it? And I think that's the whole picture, right? Like, you do risk things when you step out, make a shift, go out on the ledge and decide to leap, but you risk so much by staying still as well. And if you're not considering the full picture, you're making a really ill-informed decision, right? A very short-sighted, fear-based decision. And I can tell you, right, I took a break. I risked a lot. But what I gained from my first break alone, I became debt-free because of who I became and how I learned to deal with money for saving from that break. So all that debt would have just been paid over another like 15 years if I'd never taken a career break, right? Forbes wrote a story, like they featured a story about paying off debt and taking a break. Like I was never going to be featured in Forbes for being an amazing market researcher at General Mills that has an MBA from UNC, right? Like those things are never going to happen for me. I mean, I'm cool, but I'm not
That's hilarious.
thing. And then there's like the 2 years of life and travel and friends and quality time with my family. And the fact that like I went to play with elephants at a sanctuary in Chiang Mai, like there's just no, like some of the things can't even be quantified, right? But it's like, if I'm just looking at, I have this job, I have this salary. If I do these things, I will not have this salary. If that was all that I looked at, I never would have done it, right? So I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is to allow the fear, right? It's going to be there, but to ask yourself the deeper question of like, but what am I risking by not going? What am I risking by not saying yes to this or not taking this leap or not making this shift? And then evaluating the whole picture.
Yeah, totally.
Brilliant.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know what?
Awesome.
And everyone who's watching, Katrina's done it. Been there, done that. It's just not me and Karin talking to you saying, hey, you can do this. She's jumped twice with life happening in between, like her brother passing, right? So that's about as rough as it gets in transition, is losing someone you love, right? And you prevailed. You made it to the other side. And every single person watching can get to the other side. It's just about mustering up the courage and pulling up the bootstraps and saying, I matter. I'm going to choose me and do extreme self-love and extreme self-care. And you never know what that next right step is. Maybe it's just you like, go write your resume just because energetically you'll shift something just because you're choosing that. Maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. Maybe it's funny. I had done all this work on codependency of like, I really wanted to release if I had any other remnants of that limiting belief pattern that I had in myself. I did not realize how even in my work life, I had clients that were really codependent. They literally like 2 weeks after I did this work, like I did this really deep clearing work, I just got transfer paperwork in the mail to transfer their assets somewhere else. And I was like, oh, wow. So when you clear those patterns going, well, there goes that $2 million worth of assets. I was like, shit. I was like, whoops. So here's the other piece to add to Katrina's message. Allow it to fall away because it's okay. Often because it's what we know, I want to grab it back. Like in my industry, we're always taught like, try to save the relationship. I don't want to save any relationship that started walking out the door. None. Why? Because they're on the next part of their journey to learn what they need to learn. But I was no longer willing to operate in the place of codependence, even in how it showed up at work. You know, even though my lessons were happening in my personal life with my ex-husband, right? It's like, oh, there's the ripple effect. And when I looked at, you know, these people who are leaving, I was like, that's fascinating. They're major codependents in their life. They are as well. And so now we don't resonate. And so they fall away. So we have to allow those things to fall away. Karin, any little nuggets from your perspective?
No, I mean, I think, you know, Katrina's done a beautiful job of sharing her point of view. I can hear people listening going, we didn't ask if you were in partnership with someone.
Oh, yes, that's a great question. So when I started planning my first break, I was single, but I met someone like maybe 6 months into saving. And so at the point I told him, you know, in the beginning, this is what I'm planning, this crazy thing, but it was like a year off, right? But when the point came to take the leap, we were a year committed and we were in a serious relationship. And so we found a way to make it work for those 20 months. And part of it was us relocating, and we spent like 4 months being together in Denver while I was exploring new options. He came to visit me in Argentina and lived with me and worked remotely for a month. And then for 6 months, I think was the longest stretch, we were apart, right? And that was hard, but we did it because this was me kind of like following my soul and what I needed to do. So that was like, so I did do the first one in partnership, and then the second one I was single. So, and then just kind of dated randomly while I was traveling the world.
Yeah.
One too.
I think it's really important because we look for reasons for what we're hearing to not work for us. Oh, you know what? She went to business school. Oh, she was alone. Oh, she didn't have to think about this. And no, like there's no one for whom this exercise is not possible. And when you're in partnership, it just means there's a different kind of conversation that has
Different
to
puzzles
happen.
put together. Yeah.
Yeah, it just is a different conversation. So stop finding reasons, folks, why this won't work for you, and look for the reasons why it could, and just be open. I just talk about like being open in that receptive place of neutrality. Like, I wonder how this could work for me, and see what comes up. So thank you for sharing that. I think your story is just beautiful.
And you know what? It always helps to have somebody right here, right now, live in the flesh. There's nothing better than that. So thank you for sharing your gifts and your time, because we're helping
Yeah.
millions. Good stuff.
And where are you off to next when things open up a little bit? Or maybe you're planning to travel now. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you know where you're headed?
I'm fully vaccinated, so now I feel like I can start to dream about where I would like to go. So Mexico, Greece, and Portugal are the top 3 on my list for different reasons. But yeah, so we'll see. But maybe like by the late summer, maybe midsummer, late summer.
Yeah, I love it.
Great. Good stuff. Well, thanks everybody. If anyone else wants to talk real stories, give us a buzz, send me a message, and we'll pull you live so you can share your gifts with many. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.